Hey everyone, this is the feedback I got from the class regarding revision. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to begin with the coding, and then I'll put up a separate video for composing with vertical layering. I think there's a couple of ways we can chat about that, I think, which will help. So there was only 3 responses, but 2 were specifically looking about coding or C#. I know the PDFs are there, but I just want to clarify this further. So that's what we're going to do. Coding revision, we're going to look at integrating FMOD events using code in particular. The first thing to identify is there's 3 different types of things we're going to need or need to know how to do. There's playing a one-shot sound, there's playing a reactive sound, or changing a global parameter. They're the 3 types of options for the kind of thing we're going to have to do. The one-shot sound, that's a sound that's triggered on a specific action or at a specific point. It doesn't rely on or doesn't react to any elements in the game. Things like gunshot, things like enemy appearing, it could be picking up an object, picking up an item. A reactive sound, again, the reactive sound could also be your music. That could be the player hurt if the player hurt reacts to the player's health. In this case, our music is going to be reacting to our danger parameter for CA2. We also need to know and be comfortable with changing a global parameter. So a one shot, this is probably the simplest. What we're going to do is we scroll to our script. We find in the code where the action or where a specific thing happens. This is normally highlighted for us with a comment. So comments look like 2 forward slashes with some text and typing. It's also going to be grayed out. And then on the line directly after the comment, we put in a line of code. So that code is, in this case, will be fmod.unity runtime manager .play one shot, and then in brackets and in quotation marks, name of the one shot event in fmod that I would like to play, put here, and then we end with a semicolon. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hop across. I'm going to move to an example to just show you that now. So I've jumped over to Unity. I have FMOD set up, integrated here, attach it to my session, and of course if I test any of these, my sounds will play. And everything behaves approximately the way I expect it to. So with that set up, I can actually get into code. So if I'm going to go into code, I'm going to my player. In my player script down the bottom, it has everything to do with the player. I'm going to edit it. It's going to open. When I click it, I'm going to open up with Visual Studio. So having clicked on it, I'm going to open it up. That'll open up in Visual Studio. And if I scroll down along the side of Visual Studio, I should see everything I've talked about in my notes. So here, for example, I have a comment. It's 2 forward slashes and then grayed out. I'm just looking for something that's going to be a one-shot sound here, so I'm looking for something like move. I have my move comment here. I go to the very next line and I just use the code. So if I start typing, what's really nice about this is it's predictive. So I put in I start to type fmod, it predicts I want to type fmod. I start to type runtime manager, it predicts I want to do runtime manager. And then as I go in, it gives me these options. It starts to predict, I hit play one shot. And then what I need to do is I put in the name of the one shot. So I can flick back to Unity just for a second. So if I want to move here, I can see full path event : /move, capital M. That's exactly what I want to put in here. Event : /move. I want to match exactly what that says. I have a little red line here telling me I haven't finished the line, so it's a semicolon, and that's it. I save it. After saving, I jump back to Unity. Then I click play, and my move sound should work. And away we go. That's how to put in the one shot. So having programmed the one shot, we need to talk about programming reactive sound. And the reactive sound requires 4 steps to be completed. So number 1, we have to set up a variable. Number 2, we create an instance of the event. So we attach an event, something that we've created in FMOD, to our variable. Number 3, we start the music or we start our sound. And number 4, we set the parameter that the music or sound reacts to. So in terms of setting up those variables, up at the very top of the script, we should see other variables being set up. They're normally marked as private or public and then some text. So as we can kind of see here, so private animator anim. So after this, there's always going to be a comment left for you as we have above. So I have set FMOD variables here. The line after the comment, again, is where you should set up your code. So there's 2 lines that have to be coded here. In square brackets, there's fmodunity.eventRef. So open square bracket, fmodunity.eventRef, close square brackets. And then the second line is fmod.studio.eventInstance, and then a space, name for my variable, and then a semicolon at the end. There's nothing else that should be coded in the section, just those 2 lines. So what that actually does, the very first one in the square brackets, that tells Unity that we're going to be referencing code from the FMOD Unity integration that we've already added. And that this is specifically from the event reference section. After that, we're setting up a variable. So a variable is like this idea of using X in maths. It's a spaceholder for a currently unknown value. In this case, the type of thing we're going to store in that currently unknown value is an event instance. And we're telling Unity that we take an event instance from the studio section in FMOD. And that's why it's fmod.studio.eventInstance. We're telling Unity exactly where we take that from. Now, the text name for my variable, that can be anything. It's just a placeholder. It's just a name. Just name it so that it's going to be clear to you. It's not going to be a surprise. You're not going to have difficulty remembering what it is later on. So I'm going to do the same thing again. I'm going to ship across to Unity and show you an example. In Unity, I'm back to the same thing again. I'm into my code. I have this section where I have variables. I see them all labeled public here, then private. And at the very end, I have a comment to let me know exactly where I should be coding this. I'm going to do the same thing again. I'm going to copy the lines we just did. So if I do a square bracket and then type fmod, fmod unity is going to come up. I hit dot to fill it in and event ref. And that is that line completed. Then I'm going to start typing my other lines. So I have fmod dot studio dot event instance. I'm going to give it a name. In this case, I'm going to name it music event. Again, this is a placeholder. This could be a random selection of words or vowels. It doesn't actually matter so long as we know exactly what it is. I hit Command S to save it. And that's that for that one section. Step 2 is to create an instance of the event. So what we're going to do is we're going to set up the values for the variables. That's an unknown at the moment. We have a variable set up, which is a placeholder. And now we're going to actually put a value on that placeholder. So after that variable section, the very first function, and a function is this, like we have here, void awake, and then 2 brackets. And then we have a curly bracket that holds in a block of code. That block of code there is a function. So the very first functions we should have is either awake or start, and they're the functions that run as soon as the game starts, or if a character isn't in the game straight away when the character is awakened. There should also be a comment in this section to tell you where you need to attach FMOD instances or set up FMOD event instances, something along the lines of those above. They're in line 33. In here, you're going to need just one line of code. So whatever you've called your variable, your name for your variable, you're going to set that to be equal to, and then you're going to type in the next block of code, fmodunity.runtimemanager.createInstance, and then in brackets, and inside in brackets in quotation marks, you're going to put in the name of your event exactly as it is in FMOD. Then you close the brackets and you put a semicolon, and that's the line. That's everything. So exactly what that line is doing. If we're looking on the left side of the equals, so this is whatever you named your variable. That's an unnamed place, or that's an unfilled placeholder. We're now filling that placeholder. On the right side of the equals, what we're doing is we're using a function called createInstance. It tells FMOD we want to get access to an event that we already made and saved in our session. The line before it tells Unity where that function exists. So that's in the FMOD Unity integration we added. It's in the Runtime Manager section, and inside that Runtime Manager section, the function is called createInstance. Inside the brackets, that's whatever event we actually want our FMOD session to use, FMOD to pull up. We use it as an address, so the same as with the play one shot. We're going to go event : / and then the name of our event, all in quotation marks. And again, I'm going to move to Unity to just give you that example. Right, back in our code, we have our initial variables set up. The very next function underneath these is this start function. I can see this start one here. This is exactly what I said before. At the tail end of this, I can see a comment, set up our events. So this is where I'm going to put that line in. So I called it music event, and again, predictive text is going to help us. Is going to be equal to FMOD Unity dot runtime manager dot create instance, and then in brackets I'm going to put in quotation marks, and I'm just going to go back to Unity. I'm going to check the name of my music event. So this was called looped music event / loop music, no spaces, capital L, capital M. So back in my code, event / looped music, spelt exactly as it was before, hit a semicolon and Command S to save. Step 3, we should be starting our music. So if we're starting our reactive sound, if our reactive sound is music, we probably want that to begin straight away. So directly in this, under where we set up our variables, in the same section, in the awake or the start, but before the end curly bracket, is where we're going to put it. There should be a comment, but there might not be. Under this comment, we're going to want a single line of code, and that's really, really simple. Name for my variable, whatever you called your variable, I've been calling it music event, dot start, open and close bracket, semicolon, done. So what that tells FMOD is, I'm going to use this event, which I've told you to keep a place for. I want you to play it as soon as the game begins, based on where we have it, and I want you to start that piece of music. And I'm going to move in and I'm going to code that. So I swap back, I'm in the code again, and here I have the start function. I've had my setup events put in already, and I have this comment. There should be a comment underneath telling me to start the music. In this case there isn't, but I know I want to start it as soon as the game starts. So just before this end curly bracket, I just need to put in my line of code, and that's just music event. If I hit dot, it gives me all the possible things I can use. I start to type start, it gives me that option. I do brackets, semicolon, done. So as well as that, we can have non-musical reactive sounds. And what's going to happen is the only difference between those, step 1 and 2 was identical. But step 3, where we trigger that sound, it's not going to be in the same place. So with music where we want to start as soon as the game begins, with a non-musical sound, we're going to want that to only react at certain points. So we're going to treat it a little bit similar to a one-shot sound. We're going to look through the code for a comment indicating where the sound should be triggered. Like I have above there, food would indicate that the collection of food should be triggered. On the line below this, the comment, or we can create an empty line if there isn't one by just hitting return. We're going to put in the same code as we did for the music. Name for my variable, dot start, open brackets, and then semicolon. This test tells FMOD that this is the point where we want to trigger our sound. So as soon as the game hits this line of code, this is where it's going to trigger. So this should be dependent on the line of code around it. So you'll normally see things, this will be part of a function. You might see things like on trigger enter, on collision 2D, on collision 3D, that's interacting somewhere with the game engine is setting up this code being triggered. So step 4 is to set up the parameter, and the first thing to do is to decide whether the parameter needs to be set constantly or only on certain conditions. The best indicator for this tends to be, are there a range of values which I need, or is it like an on-off binary parameter? Am I collecting something and it's jumping to a new piece of music, or does every tiny different value change how my music is behaving? So player health or danger would be a value that constantly changes, so it would need to be set constantly. Pickup, special powers, power-ups, they're more binary parameters. The character has a power-up or it doesn't have fractions of a power-up. So they'll only need to be set on certain conditions. The constant one is the one we're going to set now. We need to send the calculated value in the game to our parameter. After the start or the awake functions, again, they exist between the curly brackets. The end of the curly bracket indicates the end of the function. There should normally be an update or a fixed update function. And they're things that run on every frame of the game. So update runs on every single frame of the game. Fixed update runs on every frame of the physics engine. So multiple times a second. If it doesn't exist, if there isn't update or fixed update, you can put yours in, as I have above this example of update, and the only thing inside that brackets is a comment. That's not actually updating anything at the moment. we can add one in, but there should be a comment, and that indicates that the parameter should be set there. On the next clear line directly under this, same as before, we create a single line of code. That line of code is slightly longer, so it's the name for our variable. So in this case, we're still using music event as being our example. Dot set parameter by name, and in brackets there are two things we need to pass to it. In quotation marks, the name of whatever the parameter was in FMOD. Close your quotation marks, do a comma, and then the name of whatever the value in Unity is. It seems to be complex, but there's just a few things there. So I'm going to do an example to go through that now. So I've jumped back to my code. I have my music starting. I have my music event created. I have my variable set up, and step 4 is to set my parameter. So I'm looking for update. If I can't find that, if there's too much code, I can always press Command F and look for update. And that will actually give me all these different ones to jump through, so I can find it that way. Or just after the start function, I can start to look down through the values. So in this update function, I have a comment set straight away, set parameter. I'm going to take the next clear line after this, and I'm going to go, as I've said before, music event dot set, and you can see set parameter by name. I open my brackets. I'm going to put in whatever the name of my parameter was in my FMOD session, then whatever the name of the value I'm currently trying to send here. So I jump back to Unity, I look at my events and my loop music. I call this health, H-E-A-L-T-H, first H is capital. H-E-E-A-L-T-H, like that, first H is capital. And then I go up to the top to my variables, and these are all the different possible variables I have in here. So I have restart level delay, points per food, points for soda, wall damage, food text, and down here I have private in food, used to store the player's food points total during the level. So that's my player's health. So I'm going to put in food here, because that's the value, semicolon to end it, and Command S. Now I've actually done all 4 steps here. So if I jump back to Unity and I test it, my music should react the way I expect. So my music's playing, and then just let me wind down. So it's reacting to my health going down, the heartbeat's coming back in. What happens if I collect all this health and then let it tie back in? So when I collected more food, it brought my health value up, which brought everything else back up. And now as I let my health fade down, that heartbeat comes up and my music is faded out. So my music is reacting exactly as I expect in the game. I could also set up a binary parameter, one that's just a condition set in a game. So what I'm looking for is like something where a power up is picked up. If we go through our script, there should be a comment where that condition is set. So you'll see 2 forward slashes and a grayed out comment. And then that should indicate the parameter should be set there. And on the very next clear line under that, I'd place a single line of code that looks very like our last one. Name for our variable, dot set parameter by name. And then in brackets and in quotation marks, the name of whatever the parameter is in FMOD. And then a comma and 1. So I'm using that like a switch. So I set it for 1 when the pickup has been set. So then I would do the exact same thing for when I want that to be turned off, acting like a switch the other way around. I would find the second area where the value should be returned to normal and use the exact same line. Name for our variable, dot set parameter by name, and in brackets, name of our parameter in FMOD and quotation marks, comma, and use 0 instead of 1, and that will essentially switch it off. So we're just using a 0 and 1 to flick between 2 possible states. So I'm just going to step through all 4 of those again, just to kind of recap. So step 1, I'm going to set up my variable. So FMOD, I have this first line here, I don't need to put that again. So I'm going to go fmod.studio.event instance. In this case, I'm going to call it food event because I wanted to sound when I've picked up food. Then I go to my start function, and in the start function, I'm going to go food event is equal to fmod unity dot runtime manager dot create instance, and then I need the address. So I'm going to jump to Unity. I have food event : /food. All lowercase, semicolon to finish it. Then I need to start this, but food doesn't start as soon as the game starts. I want that food sound only to be played or only to be triggered whenever I collect some food. So I'm going to look for the comment. I'm going to scroll down the side. I'm going to look for a comment that indicates food. And I have this food tag here. And like I was saying before, this is checking some things. So in a function on trigger enter 2D. So when I bump into something in 2D, I'm going to check if it's the exit. I'm going to check if it's food. And if it's food, I add these points. So under food here is where I'm going to trigger my food sound. So food event dot start. And I close that. Now the only thing I haven't done yet is I haven't changed the parameter, so I need to do the same thing. I go to update, I go to the set parameter line. There isn't a line below it, so I'm going to create a new one. I'm going to go food and look for food event dot set parameter by name. And the same thing. I'm going to pass the value of health, or I'm going to take the parameter called health and I'm going to pass the value of food into that. I'm going to hit a semicolon and save it. If I jump back to Unity, having completed all 4 steps, if I play it in the game, it should react now.
Apple.
So I'm just wearing my food down to below 100. When it's below 100, he won't say apple. He'll take a bite out of it. So in FMOD, there are 2 types of parameters. We have local parameters and we have global parameters. With a local parameter, it exists only inside one single event. And if we have multiple instances of that event, so if there's an enemy growl or an enemy hurt sound, that event exists independently on each enemy. And any parameter within that exists independent. So that's great if we want our enemies... or we want multiple instances to all react independently. It doesn't make sense if we have one enemy getting hurt and then a fully healthy enemy making the more hurt sound. So we want each one being independent. But with a global parameter, that exists across multiple events or multiple copies of an event. So if we want multiple things to react to a single parameter, or alternatively, if a value isn't in the same script as our event, so like CA2, where health doesn't exist in the same script as danger, if I wanted to react to health, I could set that as global parameter and then globally set it, and everything that's attached to that health would react. So all events using it would react to it. So again, the last 2 we looked at were binary because we were setting parameter by name, and we were setting that based on the event it's in. So global parameters are slightly different, but it should follow that same constant or binary placement. So if it's constant, it needs to be in the update. If it's a value that's changing forever and ever and ever, if it's binary, it should be placed only where those changes occur. The code for this is a fraction more complex. So what we need to do is we're getting that set parameter by name function, but we're getting it from somewhere else. So global parameters aren't tied to any event. So we're getting this set parameter by name function coming from FMOD Unity integration. That's inside the studio system set of functions, and that's inside the runtime manager. And that's how we end up with this FMOD Unity. It comes from the integration. A section in the integration is called runtime manager. That has a system just for stuff to do with FMOD Studio, because alternatively FMOD doesn't need to be Studio. It can be coded purely. And then are we using a set parameter by name. And then the same as before, in the brackets, we're having the name of the parameter in FMOD, whatever we call that in FMOD, and the name of our value in Unity. So if we were trying to set the value of our health to FMOD parameter, and at the top of the script, like I used the example before, health is called in your integer, it's called m current health. That's what you're going to put after quotation marks, after the comma, your name of your value in Unity. So I'm going to jump out and do an example of that now. I thought to keep this simple, what I would do is I would use essentially the same example I've used before, but what I've done is I've changed the FMOD in the background. So my looped music, which used to have a health parameter, no longer does, but down the bottom in my global parameters, I now have a health parameter here. So now I have a global parameter, and the global parameters do not appear in my events when I'm looking at the FMOD event browser. So I'm going to code this, and this is really simple. I've set everything up the same as before. I have my 2 variables set up. I have my 2 instances created and linked. I have it starting, my music here. I have my food starting. Where's my food link? My food is starting here. And I just need to set the parameter. But because both are using the same one, I just need to set health once. So I'm going to do the same thing. FMOD unity dot runtime manager dot studio system dot, and I can see all my options here. I'm going to use set parameter by name. And then as I've already checked it, I know that it's health is the name of my parameter in FMOD. And then up above, same as before, my private int food is storing my player's health in the game. So I'm going to put in food. I add a semicolon, and that line is done. I now have a global parameter created and set up. I save it. I jump back to Unity. I'm just going to make sure that this all works. I'm going to play test it now. My music should work and should still react to parameter. So as I lose health, my music should turn down. And my heartbeat comes in. But now it's being set with a global parameter. Let's give it one more test. And I want to check the same thing with my health.
Apple.
Okay. So my health is above 100 or above 120. He says apple rather than doing a chomp, which is kind of what I expect. My health or my food is now also reacting to my health parameter. So to wrap up, this is exactly what we've gone through. And this should be everything you need to do basically for CA2. If you want to get more creative, you can push it outside your bounds. But for the minimum requirements, this is everything you need. There are 3 types of coding. We can play a one-shot sound. We can play a reactive sound. And we can change a global parameter. And we're doing all this with our coding. And that should give us everything we need just in purely coding.